All right. Well, that was really fun to get to kind of travel back pre-COVID to when we could all be together in a room.
Oh my God,
And
simple times, right?
I know. And you were one of the first people, I feel like, first artists to kind of start doing the live stream thing almost immediately when COVID hit. And I really think that you made a lot of people feel comforted. And you also kind of teamed up with some nonprofits in Seattle to try to like shout them out and help them out too. So what did you sort of take away from that whole live stream experience? And I don't know if you're still doing it now.
Yeah, I kind of put it to rest. I think maybe in June. I felt like I was kind of taking up a lot of space and wanted to kind of just get out of the way, so to speak, give some other people a little digital space. But yeah, I think the thing that struck me the most from that experience were two things. It was the community that kind of developed around the live streams. I started doing them every Thursday, I think, and I would kind of open the chat maybe 15 minutes early, and I would see that people had been talking with each other and they were starting to kind of form relationships, and people were like, how was everybody's week? And somebody would be like, oh, I got let go this week. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. But it was clear that they had started to kind of know each other and be there to comfort each other and to kind of just be, kind of create community and around these live streams, which I thought was really cool. So that was the first thing. And then also it was really impressive to see how philanthropic people were willing to be at that time. And I think also they're that way now, but early on in this pandemic, it kind of struck me that people were looking for a way to be helpful and a way to help others, and in a way that was very unique to the beginning of this pandemic. And it's not to say that people have not continued to be so, but I felt that there was an opportunity to really capitalize on people's kind of need to be altruistic and to be philanthropic and to help out other people. So kind of shouting out organizations in Seattle that I felt connected to was a cool way to kind of give back to my community while also doing something that I would be doing anyways.
Yeah, I thought it was a really beautiful thing. And I think being able to provide that sense of community for people. And, I've jumped in some, habitual live streams myself. And it becomes that where you don't really know these people, but you start to sort of create this online relationship with them and stuff. So I just think it was really, really great thing. The Life in Quarantine song it was just perfect. Came out at just such a great time. And I just think on behalf of so many people that love you, just thank you for being there for all of us.
Of course. I mean, I have to also say thank you to everybody who was watching, because you guys were there for me as well. I mean, this was something I was doing because, I felt it was a way for me to contribute. But also, as I got deeper into these live streams, it became apparent that, this was something that I really needed as well. Not so much that I needed an audience, but just to be able to do something that was normal for me in an incredibly abnormal time. I mean, we don't know when we're going to get a chance to play actual proper shows again. So for me to be able to play music for people, over my computer, was one of the closer things to normal that I got to feel during the time I was doing it. So, I have to, give a lot of credit to the people who were there for me as well, because I think we were both kind of helping each other out.
Yeah, kind of gave everybody a little sense of purpose and something to look forward to. So on Tuesday, the internet went crazy because the Postal Service put out a very cryptic statement saying your meeting will begin tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, you guys were holding some Zoom auditions for the Postal Service. You teamed up with Headcount, and you got some pretty big names to show up to try out for your band. I gotta say, Anne Hathaway, Kenny G, Weird Al, Slash, Rick Springfield, just to name a few. So if you could talk a little bit about this experience and how this kind of came together.
Yeah, so we when the Postal Service did, I guess what would be considered a reunion tour in 2013, our friend Tom Sharpling, who's a comedy writer and director, was pitched this idea of doing an auditions video. So we made this video. People can go to YouTube, check it out. where it's set in 2002 and it's people auditioning for the Postal Service. And then I come up at the last moment and like I get the gig. Hilarity ensues. Um, but the idea was pitched that maybe we could kind of revive that idea, but do it under the guise of, we have this amazing comedian and actor named John Daly who plays the label guy at Sub Pop, is meant to be this kind of moron who gets us all on a Zoom and suggests that we should all go on tour, to kind of raise awareness about voting. And he wants to do it with no masks. And he thinks this is a great idea. And of course, we all just were like, no, what are you talking about? But we got everybody already together, so let's just do the auditions. And I have to say, I figured we would pull it off. And by say we, I mean, and Tom and the producers, Rob and Paloma and everybody working on the project. I figured they'd figure out a way to make it work, but I was still a little bit skeptical as to whether or not using Zoom as a medium for comedy was going to work in this context. And I take no credit in it because I was just kind of there as a straight man, but I think it turned out really well. And it was really cool to see every about 20 minutes, you'd have the Zoom window open and you'd see somebody pop up in the corner and be like, oh, there's Patton Oswalt. Or like, holy shit, Susanna Hoffs is like trying to get into Zoom the way we're all playing with our devices and we're not sure if the camera's on yet. And everybody was just really brought their A game and it was really fun. And, I think that I'm sure there are people who are incredibly disappointed thinking that there was going to be a new Postal Service record announced. And I'm sure they're probably still mad at me/us. But I think if we got their attention and we were able to raise some more awareness about, what we're up against coming here in the next month or so, it's worth having some people be mad at you, I think.
Well, I think the buzz around it was great. And I think, more than anything, people are probably just happy to be entertained by something. And, you've always, well, for a long time, I've noticed you've been very vocal and very passionate about the importance of voting. At what point did that happen to you? And what would you say to someone who maybe is, doesn't really care about voting that much? And maybe how could you get them excited or inspired to go and vote?
Well, I wish that I would have gotten involved with this when I was younger. When I was first eligible to vote at 18, I don't think I voted until the 2000 election. That was the first one. And I was 24 at that point. And I think like a lot of young people at the time and probably now, when you're between the ages of 18 and 20-ish, when you're in those early 20s, that's really a period where you're kind of discovering who you are. And or I should say, I'll just put this in terms of myself. I was trying to figure out who I was. Music was the only thing that mattered to me. The outside world, outside of this little tiny scene I was in Bellingham, Washington, just almost didn't exist. And as I look back at that time in my life, I understand why I had that perspective. But I do wish that I would have spent some of that time becoming a little bit more informed about what was happening in the country politically. Because what was happening at that point in the late 90s and in the early 2000s really set the stage for what we're looking at now in 2020. And, as we kind of find ourselves getting deeper into this pandemic, as, young people who are graduating from college are being just buried under mountains of student loan debt, as job prospects are starting to kind of dry up, not only because of the pandemic, but just because of the economy that's been developed in this country, where people either have high-skilled jobs or they have service jobs, and there's very little in between. And those opportunities in the middle ground are starting to shrink. If I was, a 21, 22-year-old person leaving college or an 18-year-old leaving high school and entering the job market and trying to become an adult, I would tell that person that I think having some kind of civic kind of involvement, even in the using this, the very easiest thing you can do with all of this is just to vote, would help, kind of create, I think, a world, or at least a country, that I think a lot of young people want to see unfolding in front of them as they move into their mid-20s, early 30s. this groundwork needs to be set now. And so I don't know how many people care what I think about on the matter. But that is something I wish I would have done when I was younger. And I do hope that because we're living in these unprecedented times politically and with, everything, occurring around Black Lives Matter movement and other social movements, the marches are important. The protests are important. The social media advocacy is important. But none of that will get us anywhere if those people who are participating in those activities don't also vote. You have to do both. It's not one or the other, it's both. And in order to make real political change, you have to make your voice heard. And I don't believe for 1 second that voting is a futile venture. I think it's incredibly important, and it truly is the one thing that we all can do that can really move the needle in this country.
Yeah, that's all very well put, because I think we saw how many young people flooded out to the streets for the protests and stuff. So like you're saying, it's, if all of those voices are heard, it's going to make a really big impact on the future. And yeah, it's up to us, what kind of world do we want to live in? And, I'll admit I did not vote in the last election. And, I kind of had become one of these people that I was like, oh, my vote doesn't count, like, da, da, da. And I remember talking to one of my mentors, and he's my, my high school teacher, Mr. Duvall, that I still talk to, and I love him. And he goes, well, what if your vote does count? Because it might, so you might as well vote. And I don't know, there's just like something about that reasoning that, really got to me. And just, I think I've been so changed by what's happened over this, this year, that I'm just like, I have to step up now and be informed and participate in our democracy, because I see things that are going on that I don't like and that I want to see changed.
And I'm sure you're not alone. And, another thing that I would add to anybody watching this who's a younger person who's on the fence about voting, or who thinks that their vote doesn't matter or count, I would pose this question to them, which would be, who do you want to determine your future? Do you want it to be people, I'm 44, do you want it to be people my age and older? Do you want people in their 60s and 70s determining what your future looks like? Or do you want to have a hand in developing the future of this country that will mirror your beliefs and the things that are important to you? Because if you do care about that, the last thing you want to do is let people my age and older determine the outcome of this country politically that will potentially adversely affect your life.
Yeah, I think it's, we have the opportunity to propel people that we want to be in those positions forward. And more than anything, I think voting, on local propositions, that's some of the most important stuff that's going to direct us immediately. So those are even, bigger reasons to be voting this election, or just ever.
I agree. And, look, I mean, we don't have to get super into it. I think the majority of people who are watching this know where I stand politically. But I can accept the results of any election if we had near 100% participation in the election. If 100% of Americans voted and they wanted this guy to stay in office, that would hurt my feelings, that would make me upset. But I could accept it because it would be the true will of the people. But that's not where we are now. We had somewhere in the early 60s, 60%, 61%, I believe. I could be wrong, but it's in the early 60%, low 60% of voter participation in 2016. So we're allowing just over half the country to determine the outcome of the next 4 years and maybe beyond. And that I can't accept that. I have to accept it because that's what happened, but we shouldn't accept that. We shouldn't accept a minority of people in this country to determine, and by minority, I mean fewer people than voted for Hillary Clinton of which it is a smaller percent. It's not 100% of the country, but 3 million people more voted for the other candidates. And because of the Electoral College and the way that plays out, which is a whole other conversation, but I think also because of a lack of enthusiasm and participation, we found ourselves in a situation where a fluke of the Electoral College was allowed to tip the election for Donald Trump. And hindsight is 2020, but I firmly believe that if we would have had a higher turnout, if people would have turned out in more representative kind of percentages of our population, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now. But this is the situation we're in right now, and we have an opportunity to rectify it. And I personally, present company excluded, of course, I can't accept people complaining about where we are politically if they refuse to participate. And, I applaud you for getting involved. You saw what happened and you were like, oh, I'm not allowing this to happen again. And you got involved. And that, to me, I'm hoping that will be what we see in this election coming up next month, is that people who might have sat the last one out because of apathy, lack of enthusiasm for either candidate, or just they had other shit going on in their life and they didn't feel it was important. Well, now we see how important it is. And I'm really hoping that we see record turnouts, this November. Yeah,
me too. It's not a time to be complacent. And, if you're watching this and you still haven't registered to vote, please, go to Vote 411 and try to figure out if you can still do it. And I have to ask you, while you've been in the quarantine, Death Cab for Cutie, you've put out 9 albums. So album 10, I would imagine, would be a big deal in your mind, big number. Do you have new music in the works with Death Cab right now?
Yeah, we're working on a lot of songs. We are hoping to be working on a record early next year. But as one might imagine, getting 5 people who live in different cities into the same city, into the same room to make a record, let alone with a producer and an engineer, let alone when that record comes out, if we're even able to go out and promote it, if we're in a place where we can do shows again, which because of where the music industry is now, playing shows is basically how we make our living. So the hope is that we'll be able to kind of start working on a record in earnest early next year. We have a lot of songs, we've been working on tunes. I'm really happy with how that's going. And LP10 is like it's a big number. I never thought we'd get here, but here we are. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, and so many of those moving parts are dependent upon, maybe to put it a little bit spitefully, people wearing masks and socially distancing and starting to kind of, and, also responsible, science-based kind of policy at the federal level and state levels to kind of start, chipping away at the numbers and to start getting a handle on this thing. I think in Washington State, we're doing a pretty good job, but it's going to be winter. Everybody's going to be inside up here. We don't have the luxury of being out on the beach like people in California do. So we'll see what happens, but I'm really happy with the material we've got so far. And I think fans of the band are gonna dig what we're putting together.
Yeah, totally. And it's true, the sooner we all do our part, the sooner we can get back to the things that we miss doing so much, So we are celebrating 100 years of radio this year. And I just want to know how radio has impacted your life and your career.
Well, when I was a kid, when I was coming online as a teenager and just kind of discovering the music that I liked, that was my music. And I think every kid has that moment when you find the thing that's yours. It's not the music that's on the radio your parents are listening to. I think obviously times are different. People discover music in different ways, but I'm of an age where radio played a massive part in how I discovered the music that I still love to this day. And for me, it was a combination of a station called KGRG, which was Green River Community College's radio station, which is, I could get it at night if I was, I mean, I'm dating myself, but at certain hours at night I could get it because radio waves went further at night. So I could get the station and hear, my first kind of taste of college radio and just the free form, wild stuff that they would play. And also around the time in the early 90s was when The End started broadcasting here in Seattle. And The End started broadcasting, I believe, in July of 1991, and Nevermind came out a month later. So being in Seattle at that time, all of a sudden having a large watt radio station that could, cover hundreds of miles, that was playing, alternative music, punk rock, specialty shows with a lot of more fringe stuff that I was kind of getting into, was incredibly important to my development as a music fan, but also eventually as a musician, to be able to have, this access to radio where you'd get in the car and you'd find KGRG, you'd find The End. If you were in Seattle, you'd find KCMU, which then became KXP. And you just get this flood of new music coming into your ears. And it was so exciting as a young person to have access to all of this music that, growing up in a small town on the other side of the peninsula here in Seattle, we were starved. I mean, we had a Sam Goody, that was the record store, it was in a mall. We didn't have cool places to get music. And it was so yeah, music's played a huge part the radio has played a huge part in my development as a fan, but also as a musician. The support that we've gotten from, stations like KROQ and it's kind of like-minded affiliates around the country has been huge for us. It's taken these little songs we made in basements and bedrooms and broadcast them to millions of people. And we would not be where we are today. We may not even be still a band if we hadn't had the kind of support that we had, certainly in those early years and on those first couple records. So it's been everything to us.
Yeah, well, we have so much love for you guys, and obviously we're all just sitting over here hoping that we can get back to some kind of normalcy so you can come out and play one of our shows again.
I would love that. I would. Nothing sounds better to me than being in a field somewhere, a dusty field.
Anywhere with live music.
I'll do it. Yeah, small dusty field. I don't care.
Well, Ben Gibbard, I just want to thank you so much for chatting with me today. This was a really cool conversation. I appreciate you taking the time for us.
Of course. It's nice talking to you, and hopefully we'll, at some point, we'll all see each other IRL.
Yes, I would love that. All right. Take care, man.
Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye, Ben.